I'm here in 0812 Paint Tools, and we'll be taking a look at the Paint Rigging and Paint Group tools in the Automation menu in Duik. The Paint Rigging and Paint Group tools are used in combination with After Effects Brush Tool in order to allow you to have control over multiple paint strokes with a single effect control. To demonstrate this, I need to actually create some layers to paint on first. So I'm going to select my timeline, then go to Layer, New, Solid to create a new solid to paint on. I don't really care what color it is, I just want to make sure that it's the composition size, so I'll hit the Make Comp Size button, and I'll click OK. I'm going to go ahead and click Return on this, and name it Paint Rigging. Now I'm going to go up to my brush tool to select it, and my brushes and paint windows pop up over here. It might pop up somewhere else on your computer screen. Just grab and move them wherever you like them to be. If for any reason your brushes or paint haven't popped up, you can access them by going to Window, and just making sure they're checkmarked. All right, I'm going to start in my paint window. I'm going to make sure my duration is set to constant, and I'm going to choose a color that I want to draw in. Let's go ahead and click on there, and I'll start with a kind of a darker blue. Right about there looks good. Okay. I'm going to go into my brush, and I'm going to find a nice brush size, and I think that 27 might be pretty good. So to paint on this layer, I need to actually double click on my paint rigging layer so it opens up in the layer window. I'll just do that. And now we have the layer window. Now before I start painting, I want to make sure that my timeline indicator is at the beginning of my timeline. So all my paint strokes will start here and move forward. All right, now I'm going to start painting. I'm going to do a little smiley face. There's an eye, another eye. A big crazy nose, big happy smiley face, sticking out its tongue at us. All right, let me change the colors to add a second color to my paintbrush. I'll go to the paint window, click on the color there, and let's kind of give it a nice bubblegum pink. I'll hit OK. Let's give it a nice couple pupils. Color in that tongue a little bit. Give the character some lips. And some pink eyebrows. That looks good to me. I'm going to hit V on my keypad to go back to my selection tool. And now I'll go back into my composition window. And I'm going to go down to my paint rigging solid. I'll twirl it open, twirl open the effects, and double click on paint. So it pops up here in my effects control. And I'll make sure to click paint on transparent. That way I can see my actual background here. I'm going to close this up. I'm going to take this and put this under the brown pulpy paper texture. I'll click and move it over a little bit. And I'm going to hit Command D with my paint rigging layer selected. And I'm going to rename this top one Paint Group by hitting Return and then typing in Paint Group. I just did that so I can show you an example of using Paint Rigging and Paint Group on the same image. And I'm just going to move this Paint Group layer over and lock it off for the time being. All right, let's start with Paint Rigging. I'm going to select my paint rigging layer, hit E for effect, select my paint effect, and go ahead and select paint rigging over here in the Duik menu. Right away, we get another effect under here called Paint Rig. And if we look in the effects control panel, we see that it has 3 different settings that we can do. The start, which allows us to draw on and off our paint strokes. The end, which does the same thing but from the opposite direction. And the diameter, which lets me make it thicker or thinner. I'm going to keep this all back at 0 and keep everything as is. Something I'd like to show you is that under our paint effect, we have all these different layers that make up this one face. All these brush strokes, if I twirl them open and twirl open their stroke options, they all have these individual settings that are seen up here. But now, instead of having to animate them on individually, I can do them all at once with this one control up here. So I'm going to close this off. And I'm going to move my end from 100 to 0%. Set a keyframe for end by clicking on the stopwatch. I'll go to about 2.5 seconds, and I'll move that up to 100%. And let me just close off my work area a little bit. Hit the space bar, and we can see that I'm really easily able to animate on the paint strokes all with one keyframeable control. All right, now let's take a look at Paint Group. I'll pause playback, lock off paint rigging, unlock paint group. And instead of actually applying paint group to the paint effect, like I did with paint rigging, I need to actually apply it to specific paint strokes. So I'm going to twirl this open, and I'm going to find all of the paint strokes that are this pink color. Let's go ahead and start with brush 11. Hold down shift and go down to 6. I'm going to turn on and off the eyeballs. Looks like I've missed one, so I'm going to hold down shift. Select brush 5. So brush 11 to brush 5 are all these pink colors. With these selected, I'll go over to paint group and select it. And now you'll notice that the color has changed. So all of my pink brushes are inside this one paint group. I can go ahead and change this back to a pink color by opening up my brush 11 paint group, opening up stroke options, and finding this little color option here. I'm just going to click on the eyedropper. And I'm going to go ahead and sample the color from the earlier one, and that looks pretty good. So under paint group, we have a lot more options. We have that same start, end, and diameter, but we also have the color option. If I was to select all my brushes, it would take every single brush stroke and turn it the same color, but I don't want to do that. Also, under transform, we have anchor point, we have position, we have scale, and we have rotation. So I'm going to hit Command Z to get back to how that started. There we go. But we have a lot more options with paint groups here. So I'm going to close these off, and I'm going to go down to brush 4 through 1. Just shift select those, turn off the eyeball, make sure I got all the blue ones together. And I'm going to go ahead and select paint group again. And under my stroke options, I'm going to change this to blue by once again sampling the color with the little eyedropper over here to get it pretty much the same. It looks a little darker, so I'll click on that and make it just a touch lighter. That looks good. Now, there's another difference that happens between these two effects. I want to go ahead and close off the paint here, and I'll move my time indicator to the front of my timeline. Now, I'm going to go ahead and animate the strokes for the paint groups the same way I did with the paint rigging. I'll go ahead and take the end in each one of these paint groups, bring it down to 0. I'll click on each end stopwatch to set a keyframe, and I'll move to just about 2.5 seconds when the other one finishes drawing on, and I'll make these both 100 to create keyframes with it finished. Now when I hit the spacebar to playback, you'll notice these both draw on very differently. Paint rigging causes all the paint strokes to draw on one after the other, whereas paint group will cause all the strokes to draw on simultaneously. So everything comes on at the same time over here, and everything comes on one after the other over here. Both paint tools have their strengths and weaknesses, and depending on the project and style you're going for, you'll figure out which is better to use for your needs.